guests. And I can't tell who you are because I can't see you from here. It's a little late. Welcome to the October 13th Rotary Lunch, Rotary Club of Louisville Lunch Service. I'm Kevin Lynch, President-elect of the club and Director of the Office of Globalization of my day job for the city. And also Paul Harris Fellow +3, Strategic Planning Committee Chair and Vice Chair of the Rotary Fund Board. Normally, Walt Kuno will be up here. He's actually in the room. The reason I'm here, he was not supposed to be here today, but he showed up, so don't worry. We will feed you anyway, Walt, don't worry. Providing information today is Sharon Riemann, Branch Manager at Old National Bank. Thanks, Sharon.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. Let us pray. As we are gathered here today in friendship and community, taking a moment out of our busy lives to learn, share, and reflect on the insights, experiences, and wisdom of others, we are reminded of how blessed we all are. Often in times of greatest need, we find ourselves giving way to the stress and strain by battling one another. God, teach us to be good role models to the people around us so that when they see you and your love within us, they want to know you. Let us work together with understanding and compassion in our hearts. Let us not be rude or arrogant towards one another. In times of tension and struggle, that is when we need more than ever to come together as one, unified and strong. We are stronger together as we encourage one another. A unified country is a force to be reckoned with, for it's far more difficult to tear apart a cord of 3 strands than a single strand. When we are able to look beyond our disagreements and embrace our differences, we can look to the greater purpose in this life. May we listen to one another in openness and with grace. Let us have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Sharon. And now to lead us in the four-way test of the Pledge of Allegiance is Detron, CEO of Global Institute Technology, LLC. He just published a book, and he's donating the proceeds from the sale of 30 of those books to the West Louisville Housing Initiative.
I can tell you this is a true honor to be here and doing the pledge to the flag of the #1 country on earth for me. Let me remind myself that when we say the pledge, just like we always pray at church, too long, too often, and we put ourselves on autopilot. Can I ask one thing? Can we not be on autopilot today? We mean every single word we say, and for me, a few key words for me today is under God, indivisible, united, and for all. So shall we?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our four-way test, the same way, we emphasize the key words that resonate to each one of us.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Dean. It's always our pleasure to welcome guests. We have a lot of guests today, actually. We normally get to individuals, but we won't be doing that today. But you are very welcome. And at the end of the program today, the area over there is called What is Rotary? So any guests can go over there after, learn more about the club. Jay Maryland would be helpful, more than willing to help you understand what we do and what we might do with you. I'm excited to share the news that Kim Halbauer has joined the boards of both the Rotary Club and the Rotary Fund of Louisville as treasurer, replacing Mike Richardson, who stepped down earlier due to personal and work commitments. Yes, he also lives in Florida for more than half a year now. That was part of the decision. Kim is the regional president of Fifth Third Bank. That's a big job. We're excited to have her not only in Louisville, but as a member of our club. Fifth Third has been a huge supporter of the West Louisville Housing Initiative. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Kim Halbauer. And I'd like to introduce Tracy Davis, the practicing attorney, to the stage to share a few announcements.
Good afternoon. Afternoon. Let's see. I'll try to do this without my readers. Okay, here we go. Mark your calendars for Tuesday, October the 18th. Kentucky Waterways Alliance will host a special 50th anniversary celebration press event on the Great Lawn at noon. Rotary Fund President Gene West will present the big check representing our grant in support of the Saving Our Rivers partnership between our organizations. Also, join us on October the 21st for West Louisville's 6th Annual Economic Mobility Summit, where Luke Schmidt will be speaking about our West Louisville Housing Initiative, followed by Sam Watkins Jr. Light the Way Entrepreneurial Excellence Award, for which we are our candidates, for which we are sponsoring the Economic Development Award being presented to Donnie Atkins, who's a part owner in Joe's Palm Room, which we're sitting in right now. We will be mentoring our Rotary Honor Scholars at Western High School Early College tomorrow at 8:15 a.m. So join us at the JCTC Southwest Campus if you can. No experience or preparation required. Just see Greg Mooney for details. The Sparks newsletter that went out yesterday was packed with news and announcements, including our new member celebration, our Thanksgiving week program, Rotary Day at the Opera, woo-woo, and much more. Please read it. Now thank you, and back to your President-elect, Kevin.
Thanks, Tracy. Before I introduce the panel, just a few comments. We're lucky to have, Rotary gets a lot of good speakers, but we really have a good opportunity today because it's not too often for these two candidates you can really hear from them in greater length than just like, 3-5 minute word blurb or somebody else's characterization of things. It's very important what they do in Washington these days and trying to improve the stability, etc. And it's good to hear directly from them what their thoughts are and see if we get a little more in depth than we typically do from other sources. My background, I spent 6 years in D.C., 7 years in D.C. rather. After college, I moved to D.C. and worked at Tip O'Neill in the Washington office. It was a different place back then. Then I moved up, and I was, after law school, I went to Justice Department as a commission relations attorney and then later a prosecutor. The federal prosecutor role hasn't really changed since then, much at all. But the role in Congress is entirely different. Now it's just much more toxic, much less respect, much more personal attacks, less intelligent discussion about the issues. And really, I think it was a lot different back then. You've all probably heard the story about Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan with the big compromise about Social Security. They liked each other. They also fought. And they were adversaries, but they fought over issues. And they weren't attacking each other personally. They were really, I guess they were good friends, but they had a certain friendship that helped, get to compromise. And what people may have heard about that Social Security compromise with Tip and Reagan, but what they didn't hear was Tip used to go home on weekends to Massachusetts to his family, and during the week he'd be in D.C. working. He lived in a condo. He happened to live in a condo with a friend of his. Okay, that friend of his happened to be a Republican congressman. Can you imagine that today, living a Democratic and Republican congressman living in the same condo that might increase the homicide rate in that city? But I challenge the candidates to, let us know where you think there might be some room for compromise. Obviously, government doesn't fix everything. We have to be involved in some things. So what are the areas you think both sides could talk about? Intelligent issues, intelligent compromise, thoughtful solutions to difficult problems. And I look forward to the candidates. And I want to welcome Shay Van Hoy, the editor-in-chief of Business First. We're fortunate to have him here, and he'll be moderating the program.
For shorter people here. Well, what an honor and a thrill to host the congressional debate today. Thanks to Kevin for the introduction and for Rotary for having me. One housekeeping rule before we get started. If you could hold your applause to the end of the event when the candidates will be giving closing remarks, that'll help us maybe get an extra question in and move forward. And our candidates will be introduced today in alphabetical order. So first I'd like to welcome to the stage Morgan McGarvey. And Morgan's bio reads, Morgan McGarvey is the Kentucky Senate Minority Leader. He was first elected to the Kentucky State Senate in 2012 and elected Minority Leader in 2018. Morgan says he has always stood up for Kentuckians. As a lawyer, he has stood up for people facing discrimination. As a state senator, he stood up against Republican attacks on public schools, access to health care, organized labor, and more. Even as he's taken on these toughest fights in Frankfort, he has worked with his colleagues to pass 18 bills into law from the super minority, including laws to protect victims of domestic violence and human trafficking, to force insurance companies to cover the cost of life-saving nutrients for low birth weight babies, and to restore a teacher training program at Simmons College, Louisville's only HBCU. With John Yarmuth retiring, Morgan intends to take the same approach, standing up for what he believes in and working with his colleagues to find solutions to get things done from the Senate to Washington, D.C. Morgan was raised in Louisville. He and his wife, Chris, met in college in Missouri and decided to return here to raise their family because they can't imagine a better place for their 3 kids, Clara, Wilson, and Greta, to grow up. Welcome, Morgan. Sorry, should have put that in the instructions. Now I'm pleased to welcome to the stage Stuart Ray. Stuart's bio reads, while his father was building Steel Technologies, Stuart attended Ballard High School and then on to U of L. He joined Steel Technologies in 1981, starting out on the shop floor. His career at the company included working in operations, sales, and eventually to management, including running the company's coveted joint venture, Mitech Steel, with Japanese partner Mitsui. The company was sold in 2007, and in 2010, Stuart left Steel Technologies and dedicated himself full-time to the metals and trucking company he founded, the Paragon Company. In 2019, Stuart and his daughter, Shelby Ray, purchased Eagle Steel and Metal Products, a transportation and warehouse company for metals. Stuart has served on the board of Maryhurst for 10 years and was the first male chairman at the 175-year-old agency founded by the Sisters of Good Shepherds to take care of abused young men. Stuart was appointed by Governor Steve Beshear to the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission Board, serving his last 2 years as chairman. He also served on the KFC Young Center Board under both Governors Beshear and Bevin, turning the arena into a financially viable facility. Stuart is a proud father of 5 children, 4 daughters and a son, 4 grandsons, and has been married to his wife Michelle for nearly 25 years. He's an active hunter, fisherman, and previously licensed falconer, can often be found with his 2-year-old black lab, Braxton. Welcome, Stuart. Okay, so the ground rules for today's format. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to share why they are running for Congress and why they are the best person for the office to represent the 3rd Congressional District. Rotary Club President Walt Cano will toss a coin to determine who goes first. Following opening remarks, we have questions that have been submitted from Rotarians. The time to respond for each question will be limited to 2.5 minutes. We will rotate the order of answering questions. At the end of the program, each candidate will have an opportunity for 2 minutes of closing remarks, and we'll flip the order from the opening remarks. So first, opening, last closing. Chair of the Speaker Committee, Ashley Brower, will serve as the timekeeper, and there will be hard stops on the questions. We appreciate your adhering to the framework. Now let's have the coin toss and move this thing out of the way.
Morgan, in alphabetical order, would you like to call?
Sure.
Heads or tails?
Heads.
Heads it is. And of course, they've got the guy with the trimmers. I don't even need to flip it. I just let my hand shake.
Okay.
And then it's tails.
So who goes first? I was.
So I won, so I'll defer and go second.
Okay.
So I'll go first now and second.
Correct. Yeah, 5 minutes for opening remarks. Yeah.
There we go.
Do you want to stand in?
Can we stand? This is kind of weird. I hope this isn't against the 5 minutes.
3 minutes.
Right behind you, please.
I'm sorry, I don't know, I haven't tried it. Thanks for coming, ladies and gentlemen.
Here we go, yeah. Okay, there we go.
That's it, that's all I got. No, thank you to the Rotary Club. What a great civic organization. Thank you for hosting this forum, giving us the chance to talk about things here today. We're already off to a little bit of a later start, and I think with a lot of people in political debates, you hear them say, I'll be brief. We are time limited, so I will actually be brief this morning. But I do want to tell you a little bit about what I've done since serving in the state Senate, why I'm running for Congress, and why this race is so important. I first ran for the state Senate 10 years ago. Our dining room table was our campaign headquarters. Our unfinished basin was where we kept all the yard signs. And my premise for running was as simple as our operation. I said, I'm going to go to Frankfurt. I'm going to stand up and fight for people. I'm going to stay true to my values. But like Kevin talked about in the introduction, I'm going to work with people to really get things done. And that's exactly what I did. Every day since being in office, I have served in the super minority in Frankfurt. I became Democratic leader of the state Senate when a guy named Matt Bevin was governor. My job was literally to lead the fights to make sure that women could have access to reproductive health care, that children continue to have access to health care, that teachers could keep their pensions. But I did it in a way while finding ways to get things done. I passed 18 bills into law, and not just little stuff either. I passed the first health insurance mandate in 21 years, giving babies the nutrition they need to stay alive. I passed laws protecting victims of human trafficking, victims of domestic violence. I passed the first ever bill that solely benefits Louisville's historically black college and university. Kids at Simmons College, they didn't have access to Kentucky tuition grant money because of a quirk in our law. So we changed it to make college a little more affordable. I even passed a law preserving marriage equality in Kentucky. And along the way, I learned something. I learned that to be a truly effective leader, the two most important things you can say are, I don't know, and what do you think? Consensus and progress, they're built on listening and asking questions, not on finger pointing and name calling. And that's why I'm running for Congress. I think we must believe that we can still listen to each other and accomplish great things. Yeah, we're all frustrated with Washington sometimes. But Congress has actually gotten some good things done recently. They passed the CHIPS Act, incentivizing manufacturing right here in this country. They passed bills investing in much needed infrastructure. They even passed a gun reform bill for the first time in 30 years. But there is still so much more that needs to be done. For the first time in the history of our country, the Supreme Court took rights away from someone. We must codify Roe v. Wade into law. We must tackle the immediate threat that is climate change. We must make sure that everyone has access to affordable health care, starting by lowering the cost of prescription drugs. As a dad with 3 young kids and 2 working parents, I can tell you that we need to have more affordable child care and paid family leave. We must deal with the racist policies of the past that still produce systemic inequities and make sure every American has an opportunity of success going forward. And we must take real action on gun reform. I think we can. I think, Kevin, we can still listen to each other. I think we can solve these problems. But not if we continue to elect extreme and divisive leaders like Donald Trump and those who follow him. This is a guy who helped lead an insurrection against our nation's capital. He took top secret documents to his country club. He rages against anyone and everyone who dares disagree with him, including calling FBI agents vicious monsters. And a majority of the GOP in Congress is standing with him or standing silent. When asked at the Constitutional Convention, what type of government have you given us? Benjamin Franklin replied, republic, if you can keep it. This race is important. Democracy is on the ballot this fall. Women's rights are on the ballot this fall. Progress is on the ballot this fall. I'm running to make sure that Louisville and our country continue to move forward. And I hope you'll run with me. Thank you.
5 minutes, Mr. Ray.
Sure, thank you. Again, thank you very much. I am Stuart Ray, and I want to thank the Rotary Club for hosting this event, and it's great to be downtown and right here. So I was here early, and I met a lot of the Rotarians, and really what a wonderful organization. As I said, not only a civic organization, but one that keeps an eye on business, and that's where I came from. Although I was born in Ohio, I like to refer to myself as a Buckeye by birth, but a Kentuckian by the grace of God. I love Louisville. I love my hometown. It's certainly what motivated me to run for Congress. But I can answer the question. Yes, I went to Ballard High School, and after a brief stint in University of Louisville, I really wanted to get straight into business and worked 30 years at a company named Steel Technologies, a company my father founded, and I wish I would have cut that bio short, but I did enjoy working not only from the shop floor, but all the way up and through management. And then after the company sold, I went full-time with my own metals and trucking company, Peregrine. But my priorities, as a businessman, a father, and a grandfather, I'm having a very difficult time watching what is going on in Washington. And this unsustainable spending from this Biden-Pelosi administration, I'm sorry, I just don't think it's helpful for our economy. It's led to record inflation. This Inflation Reduction Act, another $750 billion. We just saw the numbers this morning. We exceeded 8% inflation again last month. And so it's just not working, and it has to stop. So as I've said, as it relates to the economy, I can make a lot of promises, but at a minimum, we need to slam the brakes on this unsustainable spending. And, you know, the president keeps putting out plans and initiatives that I just think are failures. Just this week, he said he wanted to eliminate independent contractors. Now that sounds like maybe it's going to impact the construction industry, and I'm not so sure anybody completely understands what that would impact. But I can tell you, all the Uber drivers and all the Lyft drivers are independent contractors. And we talk about supply chain challenges. I'm here to tell you that all the owner-operators, 50% of the truck drivers in the world are independent contractors. So this would not only impact inflation again, it would also negatively impact our supply chain. And if you eliminate 50% of the truck drivers, it would just be a nightmare. So I want to reverse the recession that's killing America. This reminds me very much of the 1970s. That's why we talk about 40-year high inflation. It reminds me of the policies of Jimmy Carter. And we spoke earlier about Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. A young reporter actually asked me, well, if we are in a 40-year high recession, what happened then to get out of that 40-year recession? And I said, well, a president from California that was an actor came in, and he was Ronald Reagan, and he helped shrink the size of government. He helped reduce spending, and he wanted to implement many of the policies that we have to look at right now. I also want to go to Washington and always keep a strong eye on Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville needs tremendous support and can get that support from Washington. We need economic development opportunities. As a businessman, that's my passion. I see that if we could add good paying jobs here in the West End and in the South End. You know, we always say we're envious, or some people say we're not Nashville, or we're not Indianapolis or Cincinnati. Well, that's true, but we have some tremendous footprints for economic development here in the West End of Louisville and in the South End of Louisville, and we can lift lives up, and we can reduce this outrageous crime rate, record high murder rates, and the crime that's running rampant if we can lift people up with a real hopeful, great paying job. I want to make sure that we secure our southern border. Millions of migrants coming in. It's inhumane. We have to shore up the southern border. We had 60 migrants die in the back of a semi-truck because the coyotes just abandoned them and left them there. We must send someone to Congress with a lifetime experience, not just social media, social awareness, and sensitivity. These are very serious times, including national security, and I'm ready to serve you in Congress. Thank you.
Thanks to both candidates. We're actually going to kind of build off a little bit of Mr. Ray's opening remarks to talk about the economy, obviously one of the biggest issues. You know, there 40, as you mentioned, a 40-year high in inflation. Prices are really putting the cramp on families. Actually, Stuart, you'll start this one. Well, then we'll alternate back and forth. But what specifically would you do if elected to ramp down inflation?
Well, I definitely think that if we can shrink the size of government and reduce this trillions of dollars that the Biden-Pelosi administration has spent, they've spent nearly $3 trillion. That doesn't even include the education, the loan forgiveness that they just did. That's another $400 billion in debt. And it's the debt that does drive up the inflation. And yes, the Fed is going to raise interest rates because they see that inflation's out of control. But I'm for reducing the size of government, and I'm also for encouraging economic development from small business owners, which I consider myself as one, to being a cheerleader and bringing in large investment. I'm tired of seeing Louisville lose corporate headquarters, seeing jobs leave out of Papa John's or Yum. I want to see economic development here in my hometown. I think it's vitally important. And that will also reduce crime rates, and it'll improve housing opportunities for this community. So I'm a businessman, and when it comes to inflation in this recession, we need to lead with economic development.
Thank you. Mr. McGarvey, 2.5 minutes to answer the same question.
Thank you. Inflation is obviously a serious problem. It's impacting everyone. It's impacting our families. It's especially hitting people, seniors, people with a fixed income, the working class. I'm glad that Democrats have started tackling this problem in Washington. They passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, one thing about the Inflation Reduction Act, it lowers the cost of prescription drugs. It's a great start. It begins to tackle climate change and create good-paying green jobs here in the country. And you heard the number $750 billion from my opponent. What the Inflation Reduction Act does is reduce the deficit by $750 billion. That's as it is scored right now. So it helps people with their costs, and it reduces the debt, which you just heard from my opponent causes inflation. Democrats also passed a gas price gouging protection act. We all see rising gas prices right now. What we don't see is the fact that the big oil companies have had record profits every single quarter. So the House Democrats passed a bill, but guess what? Not a single Republican voted for it. In the Senate, it was filibustered by the Republicans so that it couldn't pass and give the Federal Trade Commission the ability to look into these practices. So I'm glad that we are coming up with solutions. We need to continue to have really serious conversations about this. Because while inflation is bad here, as we can see right now, it is terrible in other parts of the world. So we are doing things here that help with inflation, and I think we need to do more. When my opponent was asked at the debate at the Louisville Forum, what would you do? He said he would raise interest rates. I have a certain concern for working families around that. When asked our last debate, what spending would you cut? He said, waste. Good. We should cut wasteful spending. And education. No. I don't think we should disinvest in the future of our children. So just as I've done for the last 10 years in the States, and I'm going to go to Washington, I'm going to listen. I'm going to work with people, and I'm going to make sure that we solve this problem and that America continues to do better than the rest of the world and come out of this on top.
If you want to just remain, well, the next question will be yours to start with. Good segue to an education question. The pandemic, this comes from Rotarian, the pandemic led to major learning loss and mental health issues for our children. How can the federal government best support our schools and all of our students to produce a bright and innovative next generation of leaders and a highly skilled and talented workforce?
Our twins are now in the 5th grade at St. Matthew's Elementary. Our youngest is 4. I dropped her off at preschool this morning. I remember when schools closed down in March of 2020. It was actually the first year we'd separated the twins in classes, and we started teaching 2 second grades at our house while trying to keep our jobs. I think as we've noticed in the state legislature, and I'm sure the federal government has taken stock of as well, is that there are going to be ripple effects from the pandemic for a long time. And we can debate all of the policies around that, but our job moving forward is to deal with it. I think that mental health is a major concern for students in our schools right now. The federal government, I think, has the ability to invest resources to make sure that school districts have the mental health counselors and guidance staff they need to deal with students who are in trouble before they become students in crisis. I think that this is an example of where the federal government can continue to invest in education. And so I think that where we play a major role is whether it's helping with mental health counselors, whether it's affordable child care, and I'm sure you'll hear me talk about this more today. It is universal pre-K, making a public preschool option available for all kids, starting school earlier so we have kids ready for school, and it also helps young families with affordable child care. But I think the federal government does have an important role to play in those, in these, honestly, what's going on right now across America and in all of our families, and that's what I think we should do.
Mr. Ray, you got the same question? Let me know if you need to repeat it or anything.
No, I do have to step back a little bit because my opponent, Morgan, likes to quote me, but it's often misquoting. I'm not a proponent of raising interest rates. The Fed is raising interest rates, and the Fed's raising interest rates to try to pump the brakes on the 40-year record inflation. So when we talk about the economy and we talk about the $750 billion Inflation Reduction Act, and the market is tanking again today, which is impacting your retirement accounts, impacting your 401ks. These are not the policies of Donald Trump or going back and talking about 2 to 4 years ago. These are the policies of the Biden-Pelosi agenda, and that's what's wrecking this economy right now. Morgan and I, however, do agree on certain issues, and some things are in the field of education. I do believe that we need to address pre-K and make it more affordable for mothers. I know how difficult it is. I do have 4 and almost 5 grandbabies that are going to pre-K, and I'm seeing those challenges firsthand. However, we also have to address the elephant in the room. The Jefferson County Public School System is one of the worst performing school systems in the state. It drags the entire state averages down. I actually visited my alma mater, Ballard, this week, and they're doing excellent jobs. They're doing an excellent job, Dr. News is, but the reality is a lot of these schools, and primarily in the West End, serving some of the most impoverished neighborhoods throughout the entire city of Louisville, are the worst performing schools. So I am a very big proponent of school choice. I think we need to have parents' voice and parents' choice implemented throughout this. I'm a proponent of faith-based schools and a proponent of charter schools. And we have to give all of the families a decision in their children's education.
Just want to Rain, the next one will be yours. I think it's important to make sure we get this question in, hot topic as we hit the midterms. In the post-Dobbs decision era, do you believe abortion access should be a decision made by the states, or should it be governed by a national law?
Well, I did agree that the decision should go back to the state, and so unlike my opponent who argues with the U.S. Supreme Court, I think that they did make a correct decision in putting the decision back to the state. And now it's on the ballot in November. So Kentuckians are going to be able to vote on whether they feel abortion should be a right or not a right to the people of Kentucky. So it literally puts it in the hands of the people. In my personal life, I'm Catholic and I'm pro-life. But I also recognize the exceptions, as does state law recognizes the exceptions. and that is rape, incest, and certainly the life of the mother. So it's going to be decided at the state level. So I'm happy that Morgan in January, when he goes back to Frankfurt, if he wants to work on this issue, I think he should do so. But as far as I'm concerned, the Supreme Court got it right and put the decision back in the hands of you Kentuckians. Thank you.
Mr. Garvey?
Thank you. Go back just a second first. One of the tests of a Rotarian is it the truth? When asked our last debate about what the Fed is going to have to do about inflation, my opponent said, and I quote, "The Fed is going to have to raise interest rates." Let's talk about abortion. Kentucky has one of the most extreme and cruel abortion laws in the country. My opponent applauds the Dobbs decision, the first time in the history of our country the Supreme Court's taken rights away from it. Applauded it coming back to Kentucky, where the trigger law said that no woman can terminate her pregnancy at any time for any reason other than the imminent danger to her own health. What does that mean? When the state Senate, I got a call shortly after that decision, a woman not from Jefferson County. She was afraid to call her own state senators and state reps because of how they voted. She said, "I just went in for my 20-week ultrasound. There's no cleft palate, there's a hole in the abdomen, and there's no detectable presence of a skull." Kentucky's law forces her to carry that unviable fetus for another 20 weeks and then have it cut out of her, because you cannot have a natural childbirth when there's not the detectable presence of a skull. 14 girls under the age of 15 in Kentucky needed an abortion last year, the youngest of whom was 9. They are hiding behind this. Lindsey Graham has proposed a 15-week national ban. My opponent would vote for it if it comes up in front of Congress, before some of these problems could be detected. The bottom line is, I do not think a legislative body, whether it's the Metro Council, whether it's the state Senate, whether it's the United States Congress, has any business being in that operating room. These decisions are best left between a woman and her physician. Anything less than that, than restoring Roe v. Wade, to result in the cruel and extreme loss of life we're seeing in Kentucky.
And actually, next question is for you as well, Mr. McGarvey. We're going to talk about another timely, hot topic, Ukraine. As Russia's war in Ukraine continues, do you agree with the U.S. support of Ukraine? Should the country do more or less to help Ukraine? And finally, second part of this, what happens if Vladimir Putin decides to use nuclear weapons?
This is an instance when I'm glad Donald Trump is not president. I think that so far the Biden administration has done a really good job of two things: rallying our allies with a stabilized NATO, getting the world to step in and say this is wrong. Also committing American resources to help the Ukrainian people push back against Putin's aggression successfully so far, and also without putting American boots on the ground, something I take very seriously. So I think we've done a good job to this point. I think we have to continue to do a good job monitoring the situation and making sure that we are pushing Putin back from taking over Ukraine and continuing, honestly, the largest outbreak of war we've seen in Europe in a long, long time. Now, the second part of the question, what happens if Putin uses nuclear weapons? I hope all of you are as horrified by that prospect as I am. I don't believe we've seen the use of a nuclear atomic weapon since 1945. This is a situation that obviously is dire. If Putin takes that additional step, I think it is safe to say that the American people and the American military will be ready.
Mr. Ray, 2.5 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. And again, I do have to go back and clarify Morgan's previous comments, you know, I'm a pretty big dog, but I don't think the Fed listens to me when it comes to whether they need to raise interest rates or not. I think they're making those decisions on their own, and they're making them based on the economic policies of the Biden-Pelosi administration. As I've said in my last debate on KET television, this is literally the most serious thing that a congressman could ever face, and that's why this is a time for sending people that are very seriously minded to Congress, because the world is not stable right now, and we have a madman like Putin going in and unprovokingly attacking Ukraine, built up 150,000 troops on the border of Ukraine, and yet our current Congressman Yarmuth said he thought it wasn't a big deal and he thought it was much to do about nothing, and you can listen to that on Terry Miner's show. He said that 2 weeks before Russia invaded Ukraine, so I don't think it was an overblown threat. But now we have more than sufficiently funded Ukraine, and we're all for supporting President Zelensky and his efforts to drive Russia out of Ukraine, but that's probably not going to be sustainable in certain geographical areas. And I think we have to understand, after we've poured billions and billions and billions of dollars of resources into Ukraine, what's the end game? Exactly where does this come to a conclusion for the United States? And we should force the hand of Ukraine, and we should force the hand of Russia to come to that type of decision. And the threat of nuclear weapons is certainly unacceptable. And I hope we have someone with a clear mind in the presidency if that ever comes to terms. And so if Congress happens to make that decision, I do agree with Morgan. They'll be dealing with the U.S. military, and it's still one of the best militaries, the best military in the world. But I have to mention, it's serious times for the president, for the vice president. We have a vice president that's standing in South Korea and describing our long-standing relationship with the Republic of North Korea. These are serious times for serious people.
Thank you. Next question. I'll read this verbatim. It's a little bit longer one. Some 2.2 million people have crossed the border illegally so far this year. Human trafficking is happening. People are dying in hot trucks. The cartels are taking advantage of the situation. Drugs are coming across the border and affecting families here at home. What needs to happen to make the immigration and asylum process more efficient and effective to avoid this humanitarian crisis?
Yep.
You're up.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Hard to get used to this seat flipping. This is one of an issue that I'm very passionate about and talk about regularly, and that is the security of our southern border and the security of our country. We have to have a southern border that is secure. If that requires a fence or a wall, we need to complete the wall. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts. We also have to fund our border security significantly. And I do bring up the fact regularly that we have to remember that 50 migrants died in the back of a truck after the coyotes just abandoned them. And these are out of the failed southern border policies of this administration. We also have to address a comprehensive immigration policy. We need a broader immigration policy that does welcome and bring immigrants in legally, but to allow them to come up hundreds of miles in Mexico. Often they incur death and wounds and rape and all kinds of horrific things, and then they cross the border and still have sometimes 100 miles to cross. And I've seen this. I've been down on the Texas border. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen them left behind. So we have to address the border policy. It is just simply inhumane. It leads to the human and sex and drug trafficking, and that drug trafficking then in turn impacts Louisville. So the flow of illegal drugs that's coming up in through the southern border is impacting the city of Louisville daily and our increased drug and crime rates.
Thank you. Mr. McGarvey, same question?
Thank you. Let me be very clear. We need safe and secure borders. We need to do it effectively, though. Donald Trump ran on this issue in 2016. He had the White House. He had the Congress. He packed the courts. He built a wall. He put people in camps. He separated families. He put people and children in cages. And as the question states, it didn't work. This is a failing of Congress. Not any one person, not any one party. For decades, Congress has failed to come up with a comprehensive immigration plan. We need to do that. One that includes safe and secure borders, but also includes humane treatment, bringing 11 million people out of the shadows. As I've talked with Dee about today, or not today, but previously, you've heard from Dee today, making sure that immigrants who do want to come to this country and have a better lives for themselves can make that happen. This is where we need adults in the room. Now, I've worked on some of these problems in Frankfurt on a state level. I passed a law on human trafficking. I worked on a drug reform law that not only cracks down on traffickers, but also attacks disease. We had the first statewide needle exchange in the Southeast, no easy feat. So I've shown the ability to work with everyone on our trickiest problems. I'm not saying it can happen day one in Congress, but I think we need people who are willing to try along those parameters, and it is something that our country must do so we can move forward.
Thank you, and I think this is will be the last question before we move on to, is that right, timing, National High School? Yeah. Before we move on to closing remarks, this question will start with Mr. McGarvey. I think as a lot of business people in the room have dealt with hiring concerns. Little aside of personal experience, we took us about 4 months to hire a reporter, and it was really like we had to go out and recruit. So a lot of employers are struggling finding people. So this is kind of a two-part question. What could Congress do to sort of mitigate that, get more people back into the labor force? And then specifically, what's the government's role in helping mothers get back into the workplace as they've been, leaving the workforce in a more rapid manner than their male counterparts? That's kind of a question. Alleviate workforce concerns, and how does the government helping out mothers and families play into that?
Yeah, I think this is something anybody who's involved in business and the economy is working on right now. I mean, we pointed out in the state senate. I should also point out that is a part-time job, so I do have a full-time job outside of that, and we've seen what it looks like. My wife works full-time. As we dealt with this on the state level, I'm sure the numbers are the same nationally. Over a year after the pandemic started, 100,000 Kentucky women still had not returned to the workforce yet. Think about that. You're talking about underemployment along with unemployment. And so there are policies we can do to incentivize that. We must have a good paid family leave policy in this country. We must also make child care more affordable. I told you I dropped a 4-year-old off at preschool this morning. We've got to make sure that every child has access to a preschool option. Again, not only is it going to get people kindergarten ready, it's going to allow parents to have more affordable child care. We can increase the amount of money that we are spending for child care so that child care options are available. I'm also happy about some of the work that has gone on. Some of it's short-term, some of it's long-term. With the incentives in the infrastructure bill. I know Kentucky got over $2 billion in infrastructure money. We're using it right now to put people to work to make sure that every Kentuckian has access to high-speed internet. So you don't see people sitting in McDonald's across the state trying to get on to log into the internet for work or for school. We're building roads. We're building bridges. You saw the CHIPS Act, which I mentioned, incentivizing manufacturing right here in this country. Looking forward to having more American manufacturing. I think the governor of Kentucky's done an awesome job of that. Getting $7 billion in economic development for the economy of the future. Having Ford build its electric vehicles right here in Kentucky. With the Inflation Reduction Act, we saw more incentives towards good-paying green jobs. Let's be at the forefront of that in Kentucky and have a voice in Congress advocating for it. We powered the last energy revolution. We paid for it. The lives of our miners and the majesty of our mountains. Let's power the next energy revolution as well and create those good-paying jobs right here at home.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. 2.5 minutes.
Well, I hate to do it again, but I have to go back, and Morgan needs to look up his timing a little bit. The cages on the border were definitely under the Obama and Biden administration. When President Biden had a heavy hand in the immigration policy is when they established the cages that, as we all would agree, are terribly unacceptable. But again, this is a failed immigration policy, and it's a failed southern border policy by this current administration. And Morgan and I do agree on certain things. I definitely agree that we need to fund pre-K. There is no doubt that one way of getting potentially working mothers back into the workforce is to make sure that they can drop their children off in a safe environment and an educational environment. And so funding pre-K and identifying that is significantly important. But no, I don't agree that this Governor Beshear has done that great of a job. A lot of the problems that we're experiencing in the workforce are from the COVID shutdown, and he shut this entire economy down. In the last debate, my opponent tried to shame me for accepting PPP loans. And I don't know how many people in this room, I won't call you out if you did accept a PPP loan, but it did what it was supposed to do. It helped me protect my employees. I personally didn't accept compensation from my company from April till the end of 2020 because this economy got completely shut down. I've never seen in my life where you could flip the switch on automobile manufacturers, steel mills, appliance manufacturers, you name it. Industry was shut down. And now we're finding it very challenging to bring people back into the workforce. So we need to do everything we can to facilitate that. That needs to include young people, so we need to identify better funding for trade schools, and we need to bring trade schools into the fold as far as their funding is concerned, and that will also help put more people to work in great paying jobs. Thank you.
All right, that's all the questions, and now we're going to go to the closing remarks. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Ray, I think you're up first.
I think I am.
Yep, you have 2 minutes whenever you start.
Okay, great. Thank you. You know, it is a blessing to run for an office, and because you do get out into aspects of the city that you normally don't, and you do recognize that people from all corners of this community are experiencing pain. And a lot of that, yeah, we have had great economic opportunities in Kentucky, but it's not impacting the West End. It's not impacting the South End. And I've seen people that need good paying jobs. I met a young man in the West End that takes a bus all the way to Shelbyville to work at Magna. We need those good paying jobs here in Louisville, Kentucky. My opponent, he declares that so many things are going to be on the ballot this November. He's going to declare that equity and equality are on the ballot this November, and empathy and decency is on the ballot in November. I guess I'm not decent enough for him, but those are all nice sentiments. But the reality is inflation is on the ballot in November. And this recession that we're in, and trying to make sure our businesses can make payroll, that's on the ballot in November. Economic development and good paying jobs are on the ballot in November. Being able to afford your groceries and being able to fill your gas pump, that's on the ballot in November. And no, Morgan, democracy's not on the ballot in November. Democracy is the ballot in November. And I would encourage you on November 8th to vote Ray on Election Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McGarvey. 2 minutes from when you start.
Thank you. I think policies are on the ballot this November. I didn't shame my opponent for taking a PPP loan and then letting it be forgiven. I said it was hypocritical to take it and then for him to shame teachers and nurses who had their student loan debt forgiven. and say that that's driving up inflation for the rest of us. When he said he wants to cut education spending in the Department of Education as a way of decreasing government spending, but then in a debate like today says he wants to fund universal pre-K. Which is it? The consistent policies of moving us forward and the people serious about tackling them are what's on the ballot this November. When I look at things, I still believe we can do them. I took the kids on a vacation. We went down to the Kennedy Space Center. We saw this great video on the shuttle Atlantis and how we built a reusable space shuttle, sent it all the way up, brought it all the way back. They're showing this IMAX. Things are going crazy, right? My 4-year-old's even enthused by it. And I look at it and go, that's it. That's what government can do. We can put a man on the moon. We can build a reusable space shuttle. We can speed up the distribution of a vaccine that gets us out of the pandemic. Because when the will of the American people and the weight of our government get behind a problem, we can solve it. We have big problems to solve right now, from women's rights to inflation to immigration. We need people serious about solving them, with a track record of listening, of building consensus, and doing what is best for everyone. That's why I'm running for Congress, and I'm on the ballot this fall, and I hope you'll vote for me.
Thank you very much to both of our candidates. Now let's give them a big round of applause. I would say you both have my vote for staying on task and keeping. It was like the best debate ever on staying on time. So congrats on that. Yeah. Thank you. Want to thank the Rotary Club as well, and also Joe's Palmer for hosting us. And thanks for inviting me to moderate. It's been a blast. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn it back over to Kevin now to wrap this all up.
Actually, you did a great job, by the way. Obviously a pro. No, I think everybody's more educated than that today. It was really good. I think both of you had a lot of good comments. So that's their idea. We should get out there and vote. We want to vote, but we know what's going on. That was very helpful, I think. But I want to thank Morgan. I want to thank Stuart, and I want to thank Shay for being here today and expressing their thoughts. But next week we're meeting in the same room, same time. Ingrid of Ingrid Designs, the founder and president. She's talking on empowerment and her life challenges, etc. And let me tell you, if you haven't heard her before, you need to come. She's great. She's a lot of fun and inspirational. So in the QR code is at your table if you want to register. You have to register by Monday at noon rather. And you can register QR code on the website. So please, any guests here, just please join Jay Mallory over the right here. He'll give you more information on what's coming up for future Rotary things. So we are adjourned. Thanks for coming.